Hey, we are Summer and Candace. I'm Candace.
I'm Summer.
And this is the season 2 of the Connected Life Book Club. The book that we are going through is The Gift of Wonder by Christine Aroney-Sine. And this installment, we're on week 5, right?
Week 5.
That's what it says. Week 5, chapters 9 through 11. And it's been pretty fun to dive into all the different suggestions and ways that she has us, I don't know, seeing God in a different way and kind of experiencing that wonder. So we're going to dive into our discussion questions.
Yes. Chapter 9, Candace, to start with you. Do you have a unique way of finding stillness and rest?
So she specifically said in this chapter that, stillness doesn't necessarily mean physical stillness, and that kind of jumped out at me because I was like, oh yeah, my brain is just kind of off when I'm doing certain things than it is when I'm doing other things. I would say one kind of unique, weird way that I find stillness and a little bit of mental rest is actually doing the dishes, which is kind of odd. But if there's like a pile of dishes, it's like I roll up my sleeves, get the soapy sponge, and just sit there. And there's something about the repetitive nature when I'm still accomplishing something that just lets my mind drift and wander into a more introspective place. So that's mine. It's a little weird because, it's technically a chore. But stillness is dishes is my unique stillness.
You feel free to come over and practice stillness at my house anytime.
What about you? A unique way of finding stillness and rest?
This book has actually helped me a lot in that because busyness and just motion just encapsulates my life in this season of having 2 young kids, a puppy, a job, a business, all of the things. I feel like I'm always running. And what I was struggling with is that by the time I get ready for bed, I can't sleep and I have really bad insomnia. And so finding this opportunity for stillness was born out of a pragmatic place before it was born out of a spiritual place. But what I've discovered was really, really great. And so I think it was the chapter that just was where she talked about like the labyrinth walking and stuff like that. And I just started playing with those and just finding that more of like meditative resting in God and how I can use like that stillness and intentional rest as a way of focusing my mind on God. And I feel like my prayer life has been so much richer. And so one of the things that I've done is I roll out an exercise mat before bed. And I kind of just designate it as like a holy, sacred space, which she ended up talking about in these chapters, in the circle chapter. And I sit and I'm quiet and I breathe and I use maybe that labyrinth, or I allow it to just not be a place with an agenda or even a planned prayer or things that I'm coming to God for, but just a place where He's allowed to move and I'm allowed to be still. And it's something I'm still learning. But this chapter, really this whole week's reading wrecked me. Like it was just the timing of everything with what's going on in our lives right now. But I feel like stillness is something that God's been trying to teach me. And that stillness, doesn't mean lack of motion. I highlighted that quote. I'm going to find it real quick to prove that I did. Because I'm going to feel like, okay.
And this is the circle chapter. This is where she talks about,
They blend. So having that, like that place where you meet with God, and maybe it's doing your dishes, or maybe it's literally just sitting and meditating before bed. But stillness does not always mean motionless. It is more of an inner than an outer discipline, an exercise learning to pay attention to the now rather than the was or the will be. And this practice of just being still. And really this chapter has been important for me because there's a lot in our world right now that's in upheaval, a lot of question marks, more question marks than not in some really big ways. And so finding that trust and that stillness and believing that God's got this and that I can just, be still and know that He is God is a journey that we've been on lately. So this was really an important thing for me this week to read.
Well, even in one of the parts, she talks about breathing deeply for a minute or two. And I've noticed that to be really helpful in my life because that's something I'll do before bed sometimes. Actually, on my Fitbit, it has one of those where it's like you breathe in with the circle and you breathe out with the circle. And it's kind of been this cool I don't know, routine or like dedication that has helped me realize just how busy my brain actually is. Because I tend to just go through my day, I do my things, and it might be just a routine. On the one hand, it might be really difficult, and on the other hand, it's really easy, and it just kind of all depends on what's going on in my brain, but I don't really realize that in the moment. I just become irritable or or joyful, so just to kind of breathe and recognize what's going on inside my own heart to allow me to be more present in other areas of my life.
Well, and I think that was probably the most profound thing for me about this chapter was how much instruction and ideas there were on ways to be still. It's like, so stillness is in itself almost an action. It's at least an intentional choice, and it doesn't always have to be motionless. And so for me, I tried some of these breathing prayers that she wrote. I thought those were super helpful. And one thing I did, which there was a reason I procrastinated on this reading a lot. So last night I binge read all of it, but it was totally needed because yesterday was the day that everything came to a head. And so she's talking about circles. And so I ended up taking off my ring and just tracing the circle while I prayed and just imagining cool. God's unbreakable love, God's unbreakable protection, the fact that he's there and nothing can ultimately hurt us and reach us, that, and so that was just a cool kind of meditative breathing stillness exercise thing that came out of this chapter, which I can see myself carrying through in moments of anxiety.
Yeah. Well, and that actually reminds me, I kind of forgot about this until just now, I didn't forget about it, but I forgot that it related. So at my wedding, the morning of my wedding, I had a friend lead kind of a meditative prayer time. And so it was really early in the morning, and all of my bridesmaids and my mom sat around me holding hands, and I kind of sat in the middle, and we just prayed and meditated, and it was a really good cleansing, peaceful way to focus on what was really important in that day. But then it also just brings out all the elements of what she was talking about, with the circle being so important, and the unbreakable aspect of that, and how all these people are kind of lifting me up.
Yeah.
In supporting me as we came together in God. So
I think these symbols help us focus so much on God. And that's something that I didn't have as part of my religious or spiritual tradition, being kind of that non-denominational, Western Christendom, modern Protestant person. I feel we don't rely on symbols the way other church traditions do. And there's a piece of that I think we lose, because as humans, having that mat where I meet with God, or having that labyrinth that I'm tracing to focus my mind, or even having a circle ring, these things just help focus my wayward mind and remind me of eternal truth.
Sure.
And so this book's been really helpful for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, then in the next chapter, she dives into gratitude, which is, of course, so important. She even recommended a book in the towards the beginning of this chapter. It was A Year of Gratitude or something that I'm I should probably try that.
Yeah.
Should probably read through that. I don't know. See what that's all about. Because I obviously we try to be as grateful and as, as giving of Thanksgiving as much as we can. Giving of Thanksgiving. Anyway, you know what I mean.
I gotcha.
So this question for chapter 10 says, where is the hardest place in your life to find gratitude? Again,
These chapters wrecked me this week. We're in a situation right now where there's a lot of questions. My husband's deployment is really up in the air. We don't know if he's going, where he's going, when he's going now. This is all brand new as of yesterday. Our childcare situation's up in the air for the next season of life. Our car just broke down. There's just all of these things pressing in. And for me, I really struggle not having the answers. And I suppose that's a form of control. I don't necessarily want to be a puppet master of things, but I do like to know all of the information to make informed choices. And so not knowing what's coming next and not knowing how to secure that knowledge has been really difficult for me and a source of anxiety. And so realizing that things may not work out the way we wanted them to or thought they would, but still finding those silver linings in that has been just an exercise. Because sometimes it's easy to find those things that we're grateful for. We can just look around us. And sometimes it takes a lot of intentionality. And so the quote from this chapter that really jumped out was, gratitude is about changing our perspectives, not our circumstances.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So for me, like, that has been the thing. It's like, okay, if my husband doesn't get deployed to Africa, I mean, that's a good thing. Our whole life is in upheaval, trying to figure things out now. But like, there's a lot of silver lining in that. And the childcare thing, I'm sure, God's watching out for us. I mean, just trying to find those things. Our car broke down, but hey, my husband was safe and he didn't get in a car accident. And, just finding those moments where she called joy spots, even in the hard things. It's like, all right, well, what in this is positive? And focusing on those and just, making that decision to do so.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, because obviously I think it's even harder to pick out the spot where you're not giving enough gratitude, because obviously you try to do your best. And, if you happen to be missing a spot, it's almost easier for a third party to like look in and say, that could probably use a little bit more attention and, gratitude to those positive things that are going on. I've noticed that the area of complaining about small things in my life is probably where I could use more gratitude, because I tend to default to a thankful place in difficult times. It's kind of one of those when you're at, in the valley, you're looking up to God. But when you're on the mountaintop, everything's just peachy, we're fine, whatever. And then you trip over a rock and it's like, but you're on a mountaintop, like, and true. Andrew said that about me before, is it's minor inconveniences that wreck me, where big inconveniences, like, I just kind of buckle down and get stuff done. I don't know why. I don't want more major inconvenience. That's not what I'm getting at here. But it tends to be those little complaining moments where I'm just going, this is not a thing. This is not an issue. I should focus more on the positive in those situations. It's just so easy to say, our internet's out. Why is it broken? I don't want to call them. I got to be on hold, blah, blah, blah. Not a big deal. Literally not a big deal. But it's just those moments where you feel like it's also not a big deal to complain. But it does change your attitude and your perspective. So that's kind of a place that I could work on.
I think we all could work on. I think that place of complacency is actually a super dangerous place to be, like, spiritually and emotionally. Because, we forget, we lose sight, we take for granted, we become desensitized to the level of blessing in our lives in those seasons. Right,
exactly. So I thought chapter 11 was really interesting because this is probably one of the most difficult things, I would say, that is hard to change in people's lives on a daily basis. I thought it was great, though, that she talked about diversity. So she's talking about just different practices, different people groups, different ways of looking at God that are all super important, but we get so stuck in our own cultures and our own ways of doing things that it's difficult to do. So the question for chapter 11 says, think about the sameness and the differences in your church, neighborhood, and friend groups. Now, where would be a good place in your life to try different traditions or seek out a more diverse cultural perspective?
For me, moving to the Madison area shifted this. I used to have such a rich, colorful tapestry in my life. Like, I was a missions major at Moody in downtown Chicago. So, being surrounded by other cultures, and I was part of a very urban church setting. So even within my congregation, there was just so many different colors. I mean, we're on the south side of Chicago, but in the outskirts of Chinatown. So we had a lot happening. And so it was so much easier for me to really be, just without even actively seeking it out, just being a part of these different cultures. And I loved it because the quote in this chapter for me was a quote of Leslie Newbegin. And she says, the fact that Jesus is much greater than our culture-bound vision of him can only come home to us through the witness of those who see him through other eyes. And I used to, for fun, go to a Korean church service, and just to watch these different cultures worship the same God, but from their lens. And it was the most rich spiritual experience for me. And I haven't had that recently. My church isn't super diverse right now. We just moved into a community that I think is really going to help that. But my friends group, I'm like a working mom. Like, I don't have a lot of friends. And the ones in my community, again, are pretty whitewashed. Like, we don't have a lot of diversity where we are. So it's going to, in this season of my life, take a lot more intentionality to find it. And full transparency, I haven't been doing that lately.
Yeah, well, and that's exactly it, is it takes the intentionality. I mean, I think about the different areas of my life, and I think that my husband's like friend group and his lifestyle, he grew up on the East Side, and like he just very much fits in African American culture. Like, that's just how he grew up, and he just fits. And so he has a ton of friends that are in that are African Americans. And so that's just become a part of my life as well, which is amazing, because it is, again, something that like I didn't go out of my way to do as before Andrew and I got married. And it's like, of course I would love to, but I just didn't go out of my way to do it, or to make the steps to make that happen and to make that feel comfortable for everybody, because I don't think it's a matter of like, hey, we don't look the same, should we be friends?
Yeah.
Although maybe it is. I don't know. That might work for you. But my neighborhood has also helped, because I would say our neighborhood is probably 50-50 black and white, so it definitely helps. Like, just my own diverse community, and like our neighbor kids. I love our neighbor kids. There are 3 for the summer. 2 are visiting for the whole summer. And they're outside all the time, like 3 black kids, and they're just like always riding their bikes. They come up, and if our doors open, like if we have all our windows and doors open, hey neighbor, what you doing? Hey neighbor, what you doing in there? So they're like just a part of our lives 100%. And that's been really, really fun, and challenged my perspectives in a lot of ways, because it's like sometimes the things that come out of their mouth, I'm like, I don't even know what you said. You're going to have to either slow down or say it in different words, because I can't keep up. But I do think that when it comes to like my church, when it comes to, different areas of my life about being more intentional, I think that I could improve in that way. Like, I think about traveling. So when I travel, I like to be in the culture, I mean, traveling to be away, tucked in like a resort or something, is just not my style. And honestly makes me a little uncomfortable, because it tends to be many people like myself. And I'm like, this is weird. We're in Mexico. Like, where are the Mexicans? And so it's like, so I very much like being in that culture, and I like being the minority, and I like being just an individual in that way, to like soak up the culture. And I would like to have more of that in my life in Madison, but like intentionality, it's basically what it comes down to.
Well, and I think that there's that tendency as well to like geographically see things as black and white, when there's so much more colors to the rainbow than even that.
100%.
And so it's, and not even just like Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, but like even in that, there's so many beautiful, diverse cultures that we're not experiencing. And I think as a parent of little kids, I want them to have that experience that I didn't have. And so I loved what she was talking about in these chapters about exploring different ways that they celebrate Christmas or view Bible stories. And so like, I think that would be a super fun Advent tradition, is if maybe each year as a family, we kind of studied a culture and either saw it if it was like something we could access locally, to experience it, or else bring in aspects of that culture as part of our Christmas celebration. Understand that he's, God of all the nations. And I think that is something that just really spoke to me, of finding ways to expose my kids to that in an intentional, God-fueled way. Well,
and that's interesting, because obviously Adrian, your husband, is Romanian. And so his family, I'm assuming, has some different traditions.
A little bit.
I mean, I know you talked about some of that stuff in your wedding, where it was like, oh, that's how they celebrate weddings, and we've kind of adopted that, and they've done some of our traditions, and you've had that exchange. Are there ways that you would like to bring your husband's culture? I mean, he obviously only lived in that culture till he was 7.
8.
8?
But
Okay.
I mean, there's still, it's still the primary language spoken in the household, at
Right.
home, etc.
Sure.
I think that there are several things, including language, that we want to be able to expose our kids to that's different. But at the end, they're still European, and so it's not that drastically different from what we have. But even, yes, the Romanian culture or my Scottish and heritage culture, just wanting to be able to celebrate what makes us different. And I think that's something we spend so much time trying to be colorblind as a society. And, for political correctness or whatever, we don't want to see the differences. We're all the same. We're all one. But the fact is, we have beautiful differences that should be celebrated and explored and experienced, that I think for the sake of, what I understand what we're trying to do. And I don't think it's a bad thing, but I think so much of what makes us beautifully unique then is suppressed. And so wanting to explore that more.
I would almost say that colorblindness is a bad thing.
Yeah.
Because what it is it defaults to the majority. What colorblindness does is it defaults the differences, things that make people unique, and defaults to the majority, And so I
mean, I think I understand the heart behind it.
Sure.
They want to level the playing field and equal opportunities and don't be held back by what makes you different. But then we are ignoring the beautiful things, and we're just not.
Yeah.
It's hurt. It hurts. So
for sure.
Yeah.
So which practice in this week's reading was the most helpful, and which was the most difficult to complete?
So I got to look at these again, so you go first.
I found the walking in circles thing to be the most helpful, because that was something I'd never tried before, and it felt kind of weird. And I think if anybody had just suggested that, or hey, let's walk in circles together, I'd be like, seems weird. Nah. But it's on your own in that contemplative time, in that space when you're really trying to focus on stilling your heart and making your mind focus a little bit more, and experiencing that physical rest. Well, not necessarily physical rest, but experiencing that spiritual rest by doing something physical and kind of monotonous. I found that to be really helpful. And I honestly don't even remember the most difficult one, because I think I just didn't do it. But
I think the rainbow one is the one that required the most. That one's
right.
Took, again, more intentionality. The one, the rainbow one, make a rainbow. It's talking about visually creating symbols of rainbows to remind ourselves of things, but then it's also about having a potluck and experiencing all these different meals from different cultures, which sounds like a party, but also sounds like a whole lot of work.
It's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. Maybe we'll do one at the end. I don't know. Somebody else plan it. And but I found some of those, Christine does a good job of stretching me into creative places I never thought I would go, and this is probably one of those things that I'm I don't know if that's for me.
Yeah.
Look at the rainbow. What's a color you've never noticed before? What?
Yeah.
I know all the colors.
Yeah.
But I understand what she's getting at. It's appreciating beauty. It's appreciating. And if that was something that really jumped out at you, please tell me about it. And, maybe I'll do it.
Well, so that was the one that I didn't fully explore either, mostly because it's something I want to sit down with my kids and really get into this and experience it with them. But I will say I loved how this starts. And it was just, Jesus says, I am the light of the world. And we imagine this bright, shining light, white and pure, but white isn't really white at all. Light is made up of different colors.
Right.
And so that was such a cool, moment.
That was a great image.
But I agree with the circles thing. For me, I feel what's really been benefiting me is finding those meditative practices in this book, those things that I can sit in that stillness and consider and explore in that symbolism. And so just understanding that we have circles, that we are not just these open beings as much as we want to be and just welcoming and I am an open book, but we really are a circle. And what's in our circle? What is our circle made up of? What's outside of our circle? What should be in our circle? Having those considerations. But again, just that ring and just holding it in that comfort of encircling it and just reminding myself that this is the way God's love is for me. It's unbroken. This is his protection, hedging me in. Everything's going to be okay. He's got this. Was such a great picture and reminder of the strength of an unbroken circle.
Yeah.
So that exercise helped me a lot too.
Yeah. Well, and the gratitude one, I think that's so important. I didn't go through the whole scavenger hunt like she had illustrated, but I think that it would be a really, really good thing. It might be one of those traditions that we kind of work into maybe around Thanksgiving time of year, which of course
this was when this was written, was Thanksgiving time.
Right, exactly, which would be really cool. But of course, gratitude is something that we need to be focused on all year round. So I think that that's great, and that's something that I want to work more into it, but I think it's more of a daily habit. So as I kind of work that into my daily routine, I could see that being a huge impact and just being a really cool thing to help shape our perspective and focus on God a little bit more, which is what, of course, all this is all about.
And we would love to hear which one of these practices you were most impacted by, which one was the greatest struggle for you. If you have any thoughts on what Candace and I shared, we'd love your comments. We'd love your comments in general, all of the time. And again, just a reminder, if you haven't subscribed to have our podcast delivered to you automatically through your favorite podcast platform, Spotify, Apple, whatever the other ones are. Google Play.
Got it.
Android users. We would encourage you to do that. Just jump online to connectedlifebookclub.com. We'll link you to all of them directly there. But we will meet you right back here next week covering week 6. And I think that's the rest of the book.
Yeah, 12, 13, 14.
Whoo, time flies when you're having fun. So we hope you've been having fun, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being there.